Guys, I have a confession to make. I haven't been listening to my 40 hours a week of podcasts. But when I was a young lad first starting out listening to Bitcoin podcasts, there was one voice that I heard for upwards many hours a week, maybe over 40 hours a week, and that was Caitlin Long, one of my first teachers in Bitcoin. One of my first teachers. So to be able to introduce her in such a fine setting is just it's quite a moment in this lifetime. And Trace Mayer of Bitcoin OG, someone else. We're standing on the shoulders of giants like Caitlin and Trace. So to be able to invite them to the stage right here is an honor. Please, a round of applause for two absolute legends, Caitlin Long and Trace Mayer.
Volume up, headphones on, volume up. I came for the money, I came for the gains. I wanted a Lambo and side chicks on planes. But after a while, my NPC brain became obsessed with the immutable chain. 40 hours per week. 40.
All right. So Trace and I recorded multiple podcasts together probably 8 years ago or so. And I told him tonight as we were prepping for this, I'd like him to go through the 7 network effects because many of us got orange pilled by his network effects. And let's stop at the 6th one. The 7th one is world reserve currency, but can you go through the first 6?
Yeah, so the first network effect is speculation, and that's one of the reasons I funded Armory, right? You got to have custody in order to speculate. And, you know, when we had the first Bitcoin software, it would just generate 100 random private keys. Like, there weren't seed phrases, you know, so we innovated hierarchical deterministic wallets, which later became seed phrases. We innovated cold storage, you know, because you don't necessarily want your keys exposed to the internet. And so, you know, then you also needed an exchange. So I funded Kraken to build, you know, that network effect because Mt. Gox just didn't get the job done very well.
I learned the hard way. Yes.
And then there's the second, third network effects of merchants and consumers. You know, if somebody's got value, then the merchant might accept it. And the consumers will go acquire it in order to use it at the merchant. And so I funded BitPay, but we have another entrepreneur who really built out that network effect, Ross Ulbricht. And so, yeah, he showed us what we could do with peer-to-peer cash, right? But it was not private enough for him, I guess. And so then we've got our fourth network effect of miners. And so, you know, we have to have this pure proof of work in order to have a censorship-resistant currency. I don't really see another consensus mechanism that's going to get the job done besides proof of work. That enables anybody to join the network and process transactions. You know, so we don't want a bunch of miners that are obeying OFAC list restrictions or something, do we?
Feedback comes at the right
time. So then we get to our fifth network effect of developers. And I like to put software code, legal code, regulators, jurists, you know, judges, accountants, kind of all in that network effect of developers. And that's what we've been talking about. You know, we need to get legislation done. Even Vice President J.D. Vance was like, hey, get involved in the situation. And so that's what Caitlin led the charge with over in Wyoming. And she's done a phenomenal job. And Tyler Lindholm, he asked me after that session when we got some of the first laws passed over there, he's like, well, what would you like to see passed? I was like, you know what would be really cool is if we filled this hole in the Fourth Amendment on compelled disclosure of private keys.
Do you guys know we got that passed in Wyoming? A judge cannot compel you outside of a criminal case to turn over your private key.
Yeah, so that's kind of a fun one.
Yeah, it's actually kind of amazing to me that more developers didn't re-domicile into Wyoming for that reason alone.
Yeah, and I sit on the Utah Blockchain Task Force, and we decided to port that law over,
Awesome.
and we added a little bit to it. So there can be no compelled disclosure in a civil, judicial, administrative, or criminal action. Yeah, I know, they let us through.
Wow. Wow.
I know, that's crazy,
We did
isn't
not
it?
get that through in Wyoming. Good for you. Wow. Okay, so maybe the developers should all be moving to Utah.
Yeah, and then along with that, this past legislative session, we got passed right to develop. So we got protections for developers. We've got right to mine. We've got stuff against zoning discrimination for minors. We tried to get a strategic reserve across the line, but the Senate and our treasurer didn't like it. So, we can try again next year. And let's see, what else do we have on the Fifth Network Effect? We kind of went through the main parts of it. So that gets us to this, the accountants. So, we need to figure out how we account for the digital currency on our balance sheets. And, this was a big issue for the corporates. It was carried at the lower of cost or market. And so, you could end up having, a bunch of digital assets on your balance sheet, but it's not
Never written up, always written down.
always written down, ever written up. It's like, and then, we see how the Bank for International Settlements has been treating it, like discounting it as collateral, even though it's probably a pristine form of it. And we saw all that stuff happen in the gold market with the gold price suppression scheme, and GATA did phenomenal work in this area if you're not familiar. And so we would only expect that, if they fought gold this way, they're going to probably fight our magic internet money this way too.
Who knows what GATA is? GATA? Talk about GATA.
So GATA is the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, and that's Bill Murphy and Chris Powell, and they started it back in 1997. And they basically did a bunch of forensic accounting on the central bank balance sheets and found that the central banks don't have the gold they said they have. And then they decided to talk about it and to let you know just the full contact nature of what we're doing. So this was 1997. Bill Murphy, who had played pro football, he had been on, I think, NBC or something, MSNBC, and talked about it. And then he's home, like, jogging around the park, and some goons, basically, from the Federal Reserve showed up and threatened him to quit talking about it. And they had, like, a sock with some rolls of coins in it, and so they broke his jaw. But, they liked going after the windmills, so they didn't shut up, and they kept talking about it. And I was a consultant for GATA, because I'd been an investor in gold money.
You were like 17 at this.
Yeah, I'm like little, so. Well, in 97, but I became an investor in gold money probably like 2006, I think it was, or 2007, because we were innovating in the digital currency space with like being able to do sound money on the internet, and you had a gold in the vault and an ounce of gold that would circulate around. And in order to even do the business model, you needed LBMA gold bars, and like they would let us buy them, but they wouldn't let us take the gold bar and put it on our own cage down in the vault in London. Like, even though we paid cash on the barrel for the bar. And so we actually had to one of the board members of Gold Money had a relationship with Harmony Gold, who then sold us the gold, but it went through Metal or the refiner, and then we could get the physical bar with LBMA custody and put it in our own vault. And so it was and eventually, we got to be able to vault lots of physical gold, had over $2 billion of physical gold vaulted with Gold Money as a company. Being able to run a full gold node, like a full node for gold, like a refiner where you can melt down the gold bar and recast it and verify that with 100% the quantity and the quality of the gold, let alone being able to transfer the gold around the planet. You need like G4S and these other LBMA certified with identification agreements. Like Bitcoin just slices through all of that, right? And yet with gold, the central banks and BIS, they don't let you use it as tier one like collateral. And I mean, they discount it, they do all types of stuff to it.
That's right.
And so in order to basically demonetize it and engage in the monetary suppression. So like, do you think that like we're fighting the monetary sovereignty battle, like in Bitcoin, like they've been fighting it even longer in the gold space and in an even bigger way, you know, because gold's a $22 trillion market cap, $500 million of daily emission. I mean, gold emits in 2 days what Bitcoin emits in a month. Like gold is a monster asset. Great tool for monetary sovereignty. And so the governments, the way they've fought it many different ways, like legislatively, they've fought it executive order 6102. They refused to hear the case of City versus Dover, you know, to punt the issue. You know, they demonetize it, they discount it as collateral, like all these like shenanigans.
Does all this sound familiar to all of us Bitcoiners?
They won't let you buy it. You know, the like Operation Choke Point. They go after the gold dealers. They were part of Operation Choke Point 1.0. You know, so it's like it's all part of the same game. So, you know, being able to get some of our accounting regulations that are favorable towards Bitcoin on the balance sheets, you know, that's encouraging these corporate companies. And so then we get our sixth network effect of financialization, and that's where you really get to start integrating it with the current financial system, which you have to be able to do in order for it to become an asset of large enough economic mass and scale. And so that's, you know, because like the ETFs, but before the ETFs, you know, it's like we have a little straw between like a pea and a grapefruit. And, you know, now we have a fire hose between the stock market capital and like Bitcoin and everything.
Okay, and the seventh network effect is world reserve currency. We're not there yet, but let's stop on financialization because this is one of the places where, and by the way, Trace put this, the network effects, when was the first time you published this? 2010?
No. When it really crystallized in my mind, I was actually at an event, I think it was 2014 or 15 in New York at Crypsa, and I wanted to listen to Andreas Antonopoulos, and so I was in the crowd, and then they come to me like 2 minutes before, and I'm like, we can't find Andreas, did you say something?
Oh my gosh,
Well, how long you want it to be? I'm like, about 45 minutes, so I get up and I, like, just, you know, organize my thoughts as these 7 network effects, and they filmed it, and it's on YouTube, and so, you know, it's like 10 years ago, but now it's all playing out, but this is how I kind of organized my mind.
Yeah.
But that's when it really like crystallized. It was probably 2015-ish. I mean, I had a different investment thesis than Barry Silver. You know, I wanted to invest in the core asset, and then in the order kind of this network effects. That's why I did Armory, Kraken, BitPay, you know, so on. But you know, now we're in the sixth network effect of the financialization, and that's, you know, is on its way to world reserve settlement currency. We have El Salvador doing their thing. We have the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve doing their thing. And so, you know, this is all part of it becoming like an asset of this type of mass and scale.
Okay, so let's talk about, you recently told me you think it's happening about at the pace that you expected it to. Is that still the case?
Well, probably a little faster.
You think a little faster? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta understand, we're only 16 years into this. It was like probably, I think, July of 2008, and I went to the GATA conference in DC because Dr. Vieira was there, who wrote Pieces of Eight, and he's a phenomenal mind on all of this.
And you started talking to him when you were like 14 or something.
No, not that young.
Okay. I'm exaggerating. The legend of Trace Bear in my
I've
mind.
definitely been one of my intellectual mentors.
Yeah.
And so I went to listen to his talk, and afterwards someone asked him a question. You know, you painted, it's just a very dark situation that we're in terms of monetary repression, the lack of monetary sovereignty, you know, everything barreling down the road. He's just like, why do you do this? And Dr. Vieira's response was, you know, it is very dark. I just don't want to live in 1956 Czechoslovakia with a boot on my neck. And so that's part of the reason I got into, you know, I continue doing my blog about gold and eventually talk about Bitcoin. And, you know, it, as loud as I did, is because, you know, okay, you try to intimidate us like Bill Murray, like, just not cut from, you know, that's not going to happen with me. So, like, we're going to get these ideas out there one way or the other. And, you know, and now, interestingly enough, you know, the Bitcoiners are now, we are the financial elite.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
BlackRock
the
wants
size.
to be us, right?
What's that?
BlackRock wants to be us.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're trying to like shake coins loose, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a hard thing to do. And now we're figuring out, because of financialization, we're figuring out ways to monetize it. You know, whether it's overnight repos or market making, or like look at Tether, the options market, like kind of all the things. You know, there are ways to make this, and you know, we can indefinitely buy.
So let's talk about financialization, because this is where you and I disagree a little bit. I take more of the Rothbardian view that paper Bitcoin is kind of by definition bad, and you push back on me when we debate about these things. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, there's bad, and then there's just like, it is what it is, and it's going to be that way. Like, how do we not have the central banks like engage in their gold price suppression scheme? I mean, we might not agree with it, we might not like it, but they're going to do it, and so we have to understand that they're going to do it and plan like a reaction of what to do when they do it.
So
Like,
explain for the audience.
Kind of stratagem.
Well, talk about the gold price suppression scheme. What do you mean by that? Ultimately, there's more than 100 to 1 leverage in the gold market. It's probably twice
crazy.
that.
Like, I mean, as of like the mid 2000s, they're carrying gold in the vault and gold out on loan as the same line item. They're in effect reporting cash and accounts receivable as the same thing, which are totally not the same thing.
Right.
Like, IOUs from Mt. Gox are not the same as Bitcoins in your wallet.
Yep.
And so, like, you know, we've got that issue with, and now we're seeing it. We're seeing that very same issue in the Bitcoin space, which is part of why I started Proof of Keys, which is very anti-banking league from Rothbardian. It's like, hey, just how about we all exert pressure as kind of a cultural movement to just force the discipline because the cost to run the full node is so low. Like,
well, the first
like
proof
with
of
gold,
keys,
it was expensive, but now it's cheap.
Yeah, but the first proof of keys, you saw it in Coinbase's numbers.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I kind of came up with the idea, and I was like, oh, this would be fun. So I record the video, and I send it out, and it went viral, and hundreds of thousands of views, like 2019. And then 4 days later, Coinbase moves 600,000 Bitcoins on chain.
From cold storage.
From cold storage.
Yeah.
And put out the little press release thing, like, oh, that we didn't get hacked. And it's kind of like, whoa, that's kind of wild.
Yeah. What do you think about it all now, given that the threat actors have become more serious than even they were then, and given that the ETFs and other wrappers around Bitcoin have made it easier for more people to come into Bitcoin? Is that good or bad?
I mean, it's good that more people can come in and be interested in it, but like, if we're not like physically settling on chain, we're not flexing our monetary sovereignty muscles as well as we could, you know. And if you're not in good shape and you can't lift the kettlebell or whatever, like, what difference does it make the tool that you've got to use? Like, if you're not in the shape to be able to use it. And so as an industry, like, I don't know that we have that monetary sovereignty ethos and core in there. You know, people seem to be fine having their ETF or whatever and making that trade-off.
Proof of keys. Yes, thank you. Proof of keys. Trace started that.
Yeah, but it's okay. So Bitwise does proof of keys and Metaplanet does proof of keys, but Saylor is like prancing around saying, oh, it's a security risk for an institution to do proof of keys. Like, how come those other two can do it?
Right. Right. Can I ask a tough question? Some folks in the audience probably want to ask, but I also want to lay out the introduction, which is that when you and I first talked about Wimblecoin, you had a very important explanation that I think got lost because a lot of folks didn't come back to you and ask you why you were involved with that. And your point at the time I thought was profound, and I'm sharing it for the first time here. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I also know a lot of the folks in the audience want to hear the answer to this. You told me that at some point we need to recognize we're all about hard money, and maybe something even harder than Bitcoin would come along someday. And if that's what the ideology is, and that's what you're after, we need to be open to the possibility that something harder than Bitcoin comes along. So share with me, because we talked about that. This was way back when. And and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I also think a lot of people respect you and would love to hear you say this. And I think it's important that you do share what you shared with me at that time.
So in the battle for monetary sovereignty, I came from this with a worldview of being a monetary sovereignty maximalist because Bitcoin didn't exist. And gold was our best tool to accomplish that. And so that's what I started my blog and wrote about. And then Bitcoin came along and I fit Bitcoin into my worldview as opposed to, coming to Bitcoin and then fitting monetary sovereignty into my worldview. And the way I look at it is optionality is always a better thing. The more options we have, the more choices we can make. And so, we're coming from a system where there's a tremendous amount of monetary repression. That's the whole goal of it. And that's the whole reason we have money transmission laws and like all of this stuff is to decrease our options. And so the way I look at it is like the more options, the better. And everybody's going to find a different tool to accomplish what they want to do. And the more tools we can have to accomplish the purpose of monetary sovereignty, the more wealthy we'll be in terms of kind of the monetary sovereignty that we can actually achieve. And so that's how I kind of look at it. Bitcoin very much was an experiment. Like I started talking about it publicly as the first blogger with like an audience at less than $1 million market cap.
Right. Did you start
Right?
buying it at 25 cents?
Well, no, this is when I started publicly talking about it. I talked about it because that's the altruistic thing to do. The competitive thing to do would be to like let people figure it out on their own while I buy it cheaper, right? But we time and we have to, we've had to build this industry kind of out of scratch, and there's a whole lot to that. We have to learn how to store our private keys and like do all these things, right? And so, but that's the way I look at it is like we want options, and the more options we have, the richer we are in terms of choices or permutations of what we can do. Now, does that mean that you allocate bunches of capital into whatever the different options are? No, but it gives you opportunity to innovate. And, like the previous panel that we talked about here, complaining about scalability, complaining about not getting confidential transactions into the base layer, complaining about, the Chaumian mints centralizing into custodians, the lack of the peer-to-peer electronic cash nature of things. One of the reasons I think gold is so successful is because you're able to melt it down and recast it. So you eliminate that transaction history. That's not a possible thing to do with, I guess since it's Satire Night, with BlackRock AML KYC coin that's trackable. Right? Like it's hard to do that with that. And one of the principles of a monetary good or a monetary tool would be portability. Well, portability used to mean like being able to transfer it over distance. But what we've seen with the regulations and things like AML KYC is that they try to restrict portability to transferring between people and not necessarily distance. And so like that, we have to be adaptable as we go into the future. We know that the other side's going to try to trammel our monetary sovereignty. And so the more options we have, the better is the way I look at it. And experimentation is a wonderful thing to do. So like, I don't see any issues.
Yeah. By the way, we all missed you, and I'm glad that you're.
Thanks, Kayla.
How you have a wedding ring on since you were last with us all. I won't dox you. I'm very happy to see that.
Thank you. Yes.
But I will also just ask, how has your worldview changed in the few years since you were a public person in this space?
Well, since 2020, we've really had a big increase in the financialization of Bitcoin. And like in my case specifically, I've been able to find ways to like build out the family office and create cash flow and trade different, options and derivatives. And so, we have a nice consistent, solid P&L, and able to accumulate more Bitcoin every month, which is a wonderful thing to do, and fund plenty of lifestyle and anything else that we want to do in that area. But then as I kind of look around, it's like, if anybody's going to build something, like, I might as well, if I want to see something built, I might as well be the one to build it. Who else is going to build it? So like, and we really have to look at, I think that was part of Vice President JD Vance's talk, is like, we're now in that position. Like, if we want to get something done, like, there's like nobody else to come do it. Like, we have the resources now.
So what are you building? And throw in a comment on the Lightning Network and scaling debates, because you were such a big, very visible person for those who are not familiar during the block size war.
Yeah.
Talk about both Lightning and block size war and op return.
Yeah, so kind of around all that time, like the two big pieces of tech that I saw were Lightning Network and Mimblewimble. The problem with Mimblewimble is that with version 0.1, as Satoshi said, like, our architecture is set. Like, we can't take that tech and apply it in there. But you get scalability, privacy, and scarcity. You're not giving up any security guarantees, which is a problem. Monero's had a hidden inflation bug. Zcash has had a hidden inflation bug. And like you said, I think Morgan said, you have to have scarcity first and privacy second. You can't just do like privacy without scarcity. Right. Like, that's a non-starter.
Because then how do you know what to trust?
Yeah, and kind of like Dr. Back says, you can't build a secure network on top of an insecure layer. So, so those are kind of the two tech innovations that I've found very interesting. And so with Lightning, like, I helped put $4.5 million into the Wolf Lightning Incubator, and we had 100 companies come through the cohort, but like, I'm not seeing the types of, I'd really like to see Lightning just functioning with the privacy in there, but like, it takes time to route, that way, and so there's economic incentives against routing the privacy that way, and then like the channels kind of get unplugged, like we saw, and so we're going to have to continue innovating and building the tools that we want to have, and some of the stuff's not going to work. Like Lightning, I think, has not really materialized or actualized to the degree that we were hoping it would when we were looking at it, back in 2016 or 2017. But we're able to create monetization abilities with the financialization, so we can replenish our resources and try something else.
So what next?
Look at it. What next? I don't know. Like, I haven't really thought about it.
I don't believe that.
No, I mean, everybody's got to like figure out what they want to do with their assets and everything, and what is it that drives you. So, in order to be a hodler of last resort for an asset, and this is where I think Roger Ver went wrong, you really have to understand what you're buying and why you're buying it and why you're going to hold it. Like, you have to have conviction. And, if you introduce something confusingly similar to somebody and call Bitcoin Cash the real Bitcoin, like, how solid of a hodler can that person really be without that, like, full informed consent on what they're doing? And so it becomes incumbent on each of us to do our own research, like, review all the stuff, like, figure out what we want to use, like, figure out what we're trying to accomplish, and go and make our decisions. And so for me, monetary sovereignty maximalist, in a position where able to monetize Bitcoin, we have it as a prime collateral asset, which means that you can sit there and use it as collateral to sell physically settled puts on stuff, and like, all day long. So so I mean, there's all types of stuff we can do with it. We can acquire real estate, or we can acquire like businesses. That's one thing I'd like to do, is have a treasury company that's got a Berkshire Hathaway type of model that's very long time horizon with cash flow businesses. I don't do anything debt based. I don't do any leverage. So it's just it's a financial fortress, and I like the cash flow that comes in, like in a dependable, passive way. And that means that you can just always be taking more monetary sovereignty territory. More Bitcoins every month just come into the, just come in and like, they're, I have no reason to sell them. And if I do sell them, it's at, 30, I sell like 15 and 20 20 Delta calls, that are 6 weeks out, and then you can roll them up and out. So and I sell puts. So, we are able to harvest the vol on Bitcoin. So this is all part of that financialization that then gives us even more resources and firepower for, what we want to accomplish. I kind of analogize it. My 10th great grandfather was William Bradford, came over on the Mayflower, wanted to leave a legacy of religious freedom to his descendants. He came over as a penniless orphan. 400 years later, I run into Bitcoin. Man, if I'd run into Bitcoin with the resources I have now, it'd be a totally different game, right? And so, we're now stepping into this age where, like, Trump is giving us that political cover that we can now experiment on stuff. Like the DOJ memo is very positive towards engaging in privacy stuff. I mean, who in their right mind would try to do anything privacy related during the Biden administration?
Yeah. End up in jail.
Well, look at the Samurai Wall guys and look at the Wasabi Wall guys. I mean, like, I'm sympathetic to their cause, but like working on that stuff was stupid under that environment. Like you were asking for it as a political activist, which, sometimes that's what it takes. Rosa Parks or whatever, like, and we took that risk with Bitcoin in the early days.
Yes,
part of BitPay was carving out a merchant processing exemption to the money transmission laws. If you own all or part of an unlicensed money transmission business, so one share as a passive investor, 5 years in jail. We didn't know, but we wanted to fund it, to build the stuff. Like Greg Maxwell, he put $500,000 into his client trust account so that he could work on stuff. Lawyer trying client trust account in case he got prosecuted for doing Bitcoin core developer work. In 2011, he could have taken that and bought a whole bunch of Bitcoin, right? So I mean, we took a lot of risk to, take our position with digital scarcity. And now that we've taken that position and we've fortified it and defending it, now, well, where's the next horizon of monetary sovereignty that we can take? And like, let's start allocating some resources there. Like 2020, I did a podcast with Stephen Livera, and I talked about how, digital scarcity is like Europe. It's basically just a mopping up operation now. Like BlackRock's trying to buy our coins. Good luck with that. But the Pacific.
Oh, it's self-alert.
Yeah. There's no reason. There's no reason. I mean, we should be competing with them.
Yeah.
I mean, we should be acquiring more Bitcoin every month.
Yeah.
And we this compounded rate. I mean, it's kind of wild. But the analogy, Europe was digital scarcity. Well, we have the Pacific, and in my opinion, the Pacific is probably related to privacy because that's what the regulators are really sensitive about. And so since we have, and when we look at the Pacific, there's like a little tugboat over there. I mean, the entire market cap is $9 billion. Like, that's a week of daily emission from Bitcoin. Like, there's nothing over there right now. It's totally green, totally undeveloped, uncharted. Like there are no tools, really. I mean, we got some things like cashew and whatnot, but there's a ton of opportunity there.
So that's where you're playing. And when you talk about building things and what you're doing with your family office
now.
now.
Well, that's one idea, I mean, we're building a whole bunch of stuff. Got 9-figure apartment complexes. I got all types of things that I got my fingers in. But, that's when you're looking at where could there be a moonshot thing, or where is there, with my family foundations, what I wanted to focus on: religious freedom, health freedom, and monetary sovereignty. So if we're going to focus on monetary sovereignty, well, we can do that through litigation or we can do it through building tools, than just cypherpunks write code, right? So let's write it
and put it out there and see if the market likes it at all.
Well, let me wrap up by saying I was at a dinner with Jameson earlier, thanks to Casa for hosting the dinner. And there was a client there who used Armory and asked me to thank you for making Armory available in the early years. A lot of folks probably have no idea what that is, but if you don't know what Trace has done for this space, it's incredible that he's back, and welcome back. Really appreciate you being back.
And Armory specifically was 2,500 Bitcoins. That was the investment in there.
Amazing.
You know, to build the fundamental custody infrastructure. And just from people that came and asked for customer support, over half of all the Bitcoin that existed were being custodied in Armory. You know, so this was being used on all the exchanges and all the stuff. So, yeah, I mean, these tools don't just build themselves. Like, the monetary sovereignty isn't just going to like come down from some cloud and like put itself on the table for you to get. Like, we have to go and claim it. We have to go and take it if we want it. And the governments and things, they're going to actively be fighting against it.
Yeah,
You know,
that we know.
they don't want that to be an easy thing for people to get.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, we've all got our marching orders for Trace. So welcome back. Let's go, Phil.
Thanks, great.
You know,
And that's just the start.